Days of Lavender Fields. In a quiet corner of southern France, nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of lavender, was the small village of Verlaine. The village was known for its peace, its perfume, and for a little bookshop named Les Jours d'Amour, the Days of Love. It was in this bookshop that the story of Camille and Etienne began. Camille Rousseau was a young woman in her late 20s, who had left the bustling city of Paris in search of something quieter, something real. After a painful breakup and the loss of her mother, she inherited a crumbling cottage in Verlaine from her grandmother. With no clear plan but a heart full of questions, she moved there, hoping to heal. Etienne Laurent was the owner of Les Jours d'Amour, a bookshop passed down from his grandfather. With a passion for literature and a poet's soul, he lived a life rooted in routine: morning coffee, tending the shop, evening walks. He had once been engaged, but the woman he loved left him to chase a career overseas. Since then, he had poured all his affection into books. One rainy afternoon, Camille stepped into the bookshop for shelter. The scent of old pages and lavender greeted her. Etienne looked up from his desk, surprised to see a new face. She smiled awkwardly. "I was just passing by. It's beautiful in here." He nodded. "You're welcome to stay as long as you like. The rain doesn't seem in a hurry to leave." As the hours passed, Camille found herself lost in poetry, and Etienne found himself stealing glances. She came back the next day. Then the next. Over coffee and shared verses, they grew closer. She told him about her mother's lullabies and her dream of writing. He spoke of his favorite authors, of heartbreak, and how he still believed in love, even if it had forgotten him. Spring turned into summer, and the lavender fields around Verlaine bloomed in waves of purple and gold. Etienne began leaving handwritten poems inside the books Camille borrowed. She responded with little stories tucked behind shelves. Their courtship was quiet, poetic, and filled with silences that said more than words ever could. One evening, as they sat on a hillside watching the sun dip below the horizon, Etienne finally spoke the words that had been blooming inside him like the fields around them. "Camille, when I met you, my world was gray. But you painted it with light and laughter. I don't want to imagine this life without you anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of recognition. She reached for his hand. "You didn't just give me a place to belong. You gave me back my voice. I love you, Etienne." They kissed as the wind carried the scent of lavender around them, the village lights twinkling in the distance. Years passed. Camille became a writer, publishing her first novel inspired by the bookshop where she fell in love. Etienne kept Les Jours d'Amour open, now with a special corner dedicated to her books. They married under the arch of blooming lavender, with the entire village gathered in joy. Some said their love was like a story written in the stars. But Camille always believed it was something simpler, two souls that finally found their way home, in books, in words, and in each other. The light beyond the lake. In the small lakeside town of Alderhill, where the mist rolled in each morning like a gentle whisper, lived a woman named Alara. She was the town's librarian, quiet, graceful, and always seen with a book in her hand. Her days were wrapped in the rustle of pages and the scent of old parchment, her heart filled with stories she'd never lived but always longed for. Across the lake, hidden among the pines, was a cabin where a man named Lucien had just returned after years away. Once a celebrated pianist, Lucien had vanished from the world of music after losing his hearing in a car accident. He had come to Alderhill not to heal, but to disappear. Music, once the pulse of his soul, now felt like a ghost trapped inside him. Alara first saw him on an autumn morning, standing by the lake, staring at the ripples. He looked like someone carrying invisible weight, and something in her heart stirred. She didn't speak to him at first, only observed. From the dock, from the library window, from the quiet path by the water. One day, she left a book on the bench by the lake, the sound and the silence. Inside, she'd written, "Sometimes, the quiet carries the loudest melodies." When she returned the next day, the book was gone, replaced with a small, folded note. "I can't hear anymore, but I still feel the music in the way the wind moves through the trees. L. It became a ritual. She left books. He left letters. They never met face to face, yet through ink and emotion, their souls unfolded like the pages of a shared novel. She wrote of her dreams, of loneliness, of the ache of waiting for something unnamed. He wrote of silence, of loss, and of how he could still feel the vibrations of piano keys in his fingertips. Winter came. The lake froze. Still, the letters continued, longer now, more personal. Then one evening, as the first snow fell, Alara found no note. No book had been taken. She waited 3 days. On the 4th, she walked across the frozen lake, her heart trembling with worry and something dangerously close to hope. She knocked on the cabin door. Lucien opened it, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had not expected her to come. He had not even allowed himself to imagine it. Yet there she was, real, breathing, and more beautiful than any story he'd ever read. "I wanted to see the man who writes like he's composing music," she said softly. He stepped aside. Inside the cabin were pages and pages of their letters, tacked to the walls like memories made real. They sat in silence at first, awkward but full of emotion. Then Alara reached into her coat and handed him a journal. "This is empty," he signed. "So let's write it together," she replied, smiling. From that day on, they built a new story, one of walks through snow-covered paths, silent dinners full of glances and laughter, and evenings by the fireplace where Lucien would rest his hands on the piano keys, not to play, but to feel. And when spring melted the lake, they sat by the dock where it all began, no more letters needed. They spoke in touch, in smiles, in shared silence. And in the language of love, so quiet, yet louder than anything else, Alara and Lucien found the music they thought they'd lost. Forever started not with a kiss, but with a book on a bench and a note that said, "I hear you." The light beyond the lake. In a quiet lakeside town nestled between pine-covered hills and endless fields of wildflowers, lived a girl named Alara. She worked as a librarian in the town's only library, a small, warm building filled with the scent of old pages, sunlit windows, and stories waiting to be lived. Alara had always been drawn to the quietness of books, believing love was something best read about, not experienced. That was until the summer of her 27th year, when a stranger arrived. His name was Selim. A travel photographer with an easy smile, sun-kissed skin, and a camera always hanging from his neck. He rented the small cottage across the lake, where the lanterns flickered like stars at night. Selim wasn't like the townspeople. He asked questions, listened with genuine wonder, and laughed like he had the sky in his lungs. Alara met him one rainy afternoon. He entered the library, soaked from head to toe, and asked for a book about the history of the town. She handed him Echoes by the Water, one of her favorites. Their hands brushed. He smiled. "Do you believe stories live inside these pages?" he asked. She blinked. "Only the ones waiting to come true." From that day on, Selim came every morning. Sometimes for books, sometimes for conversation, and eventually, for Alara. They'd sit under the old oak tree behind the library, reading aloud, trading secrets and stories. He told her of the northern lights he once chased in Iceland, and she shared her dream of writing her own novel someday. When summer reached its peak, Selim asked Alara to join him on a sunrise hike to the highest cliff overlooking the lake. They stood together in silence as the sky turned shades of gold and lavender. "Alara," he said softly, "do you ever wonder what happens when a story reaches the last page?" She smiled. "Maybe it begins again. Just, in a different way." He turned toward her, eyes full of something she didn't have a name for yet. "I don't want this to end. Stay with me, beyond this summer. Beyond the lake." But fear crept into Alara's heart. She had never left her hometown. Her life was rooted in quiet routines, in unread novels and unsaid words. So she shook her head gently. "I'm not like you, Selim. My life is here." He left a week later, after giving her a small, leather-bound journal. "For your story," he whispered. "Write it. Even if I'm not in it." Seasons changed. Leaves fell, snow came, and spring returned. The lake froze, then thawed. And Alara, she wrote. She poured her heart into that journal, not as a farewell, but as a map. A story of a girl who was afraid to love, and the boy who taught her how. A year later, her first novel was published, The Light Beyond the Lake. On the dedication page, it simply read, "To the one who made the silence sing." At her book signing in the city, among the crowd of readers and flashing cameras, she saw him. Selim stood at the back, holding her book close to his chest, his camera still hanging from his neck. Their eyes met. No words were needed. She walked to him, and he opened his arms as if he'd been waiting forever. This time, she didn't hesitate. And in that embrace, Alara realized something: love wasn't the end of the story. It was where all good stories began.